I think all of those contribute to sort of a vacuum in the community. And I think that young people, particularly those who aren't benefiting from, attentive parents, I think fill that vacuum. And I think some of that is going to have to be reversed, not only by taking guns off the street, but by having, high-quality after-school programs, high-quality early education programs, prevention and intervention programs to get young people back into school, on track, focused on positive activities. Very little is written about just the fact that, for example, again, you talk to my wife or her brother, and they will talk about how when they were growing up, the park district, Little League, community-sponsored dance recitals, there were always things for kids going on.
But do you remember which year the U.S. had the highest murder rate?
I don't, but I suspect it would have been like in around 83?
In 1930.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was because of prohibition. So
yeah, the drug trade certainly does not help.
I think that's why it started to go up in the 60s.
Yeah, the drug trade certainly doesn't help. And part of what's, I know that part of the theory about why, violent crime has gone down over the last 10 years is that basically, the war over the market, the turf has been settled. And that makes sense to me. I mean, I do think that, part of the solution to the crime problem is, and in this sense I'm old-fashioned, and I assume probably not that different from my competitors on this score. I believe in root causes. I think that if people have jobs, and if young people see a track towards getting a living wage job, that the likelihood of reducing violence of all sorts is increased. I've always been convinced that even when it comes to the drug trade, as lucrative as the drug trade is, I've argued that if you go to a corner where there are 10 guys dealing crack, and you tell those 10 kids, listen, right now I can get you into a program that gives you training, pays a living wage, and will give you a skill and the potential for advancement in a career. Then not all 10 of them would sign up, but 6 or 7 of them would.
So that's a good segue to education.
Yeah.
And I think I have one of your press releases about
technology,
bringing computers and bringing internet links. And when you go to the schools, do most of them have internet links, or how?
No. I mean, what's happening right now is that most of them have, I've got to remember the terminology here. They basically have wiring going into the school.
Okay.
I think it's consolidated from central office right now.
Okay.
So there's a line from central office to the principal's office or the administration office in a school that permits internet communication and email going back and forth, basically for administrative functions, grades, budgets, things like that. The next step then is wiring the actual classrooms. And I think it's only a handful of schools that actually have wiring into the classrooms and enough computers that kids can actually, in any meaningful sort of way, access the internet.
Is this throughout the district or specifically on the south side? Throughout the school district?
I think that it is throughout the school district. It is worse on. Let me be careful. I think it is throughout. It is what's happened is that I think that you probably are more likely to see internet magnets in magnet schools, schools in middle-class areas where the parents are a little more aggressive. And so I think the decisions have been made to
Congress started to distribute money?
Congress started a program called the E-rate program.
Okay.
And that helps local schools fund the wiring required for internet connections. The money hasn't been enough.
Okay. How much has come to the first district?
I would have to check on exactly how much money has come to the first district.
Okay.
And I can give that information. But part of what my proposal, part of what made, I think, our proposal interesting is that it's an example of how increasingly, I think, in the modern era, the solution to some of our social problems lies not just in a government program or simply in government funding, but connecting government resources to private resources, to non-for-profit resources. I mean, what I was very impressed with was the fact that the University of Chicago had joined a partnership and was functioning as a hub with 28 schools in and around the University of Chicago. What they were doing was they were helping to subsidize the purchase of the hardware, the actual computers. They were providing teacher training because the teachers don't oftentimes understand the technology very well. They're designing curriculum so that because part of what has been happening with computers is a lot of times the computers sit there and the only curriculum available is putting the mimeograph multiple choice tests that they're getting onto the computer screen so that you tap in your answer as opposed to writing it. But it's not any more creative. It's not using the internet to, download, Dr. King's speeches or, the art of, the Ming Dynasty or what have you to incorporate that into your studies. And then finally, the University of Chicago is providing support services to these schools. Now, and what's interesting about our proposal is if you look at the First Congressional District, you've got the Illinois Institute of Technology, you've got the University of Chicago, you've got Chicago State University, you've got two community colleges, Kennedy King and Daly College. And what we're talking about is creating 5 hubs across the district that can replicate that kind of relationship between institutions of higher learning and the schools. Ultimately, I think that that then becomes the base also for connecting businesses to institutions of higher learning, and there potentially is an economic development spin-off. I mean, one of the things that I've been interested in looking at is how can we use these world-class institutions that we've got, I mean, the University of Chicago, IIT, that are at the forefront of information technology, to actually create economic spin-offs in the First Congressional District. There's no logistical reason why businesses in the high-tech area shouldn't locate in the First Congressional District. I mean, in terms of easy access to transportation, to the loop, it's all right there. The impediment is that marketing the area and creating the kind of human capital
and having an educated population.
And having an educated base, population base. And so, that's part of the reason why I think, we announced this technology program was not because I think technology solves all the education problems in these schools. Technology doesn't do any good if the kids don't know how to read, and if they don't have a strong base in the 3 R's. But what it does do is, I think, our technology proposal highlights the opportunities as we move into a new economy to utilize the resources of these various sectors and get them to work together. And I think that, I know that Congressman Rush, and I joke that Congressman Rush and Senator Trotter are similar in the sense that, they're like the rooster who thinks because they crow, that's why the sun came up. I mean, there's almost, But one thing that an approach that is different, I think, that differentiates me and Senator Trotter, for example, is my critique of Congressman Rush is not simply that he hasn't brought back the bacon.
Right.
My critique is actually that given that there are federal resources available, increasingly I think the task of any political leader is to think about how do we create the institutional framework on the ground to get those resources and make sure that they work effectively.
But you talked about bringing internet dollars. I mean, if the Democrats take the House back, he would be head of the telecommunications subcommittee. I mean, how can you be more effective than someone in that position?
Well, as I said before, I think that the challenge is to design the programs at the ground level.
Okay.
I think that if you design good programs, you can get money. Another good example, I think, is in the job training area. I mean, there are a lot of federal dollars and state dollars that flow into job training. But if you walk down the south side of Chicago and you walk up to a guy who is looking for a job and you ask him, do you know where to go to get some training for yourself? He'll say no. He doesn't know because the programs are not designed to be user-friendly. People don't know how to access them. There's no outreach provided for information. Once they get into the program, half the programs are outdated, outmoded, aren't designed to train people for the jobs that actually exist out in the district. One of the things I'm proud of is we have member initiatives where we bring back dollars to our particular district. And over the last 2 years, I've obtained $1 million for Kennedy King to help run a program called Opening Doors, Changing Lives. It's a program a job training program that is relatively short-term, designed to give people with just a GED a foot in the door into living wage jobs. Nurses assistant, air conditioning and heating, repair, things like this. Part of the reason that I funded the program, and explicitly when I provided the funds to Kennedy King, I said, talk to employers first and find out what jobs they're actually hiring for, and have them help you think about how you're designing this program. There was a graduation this summer where 80 graduates of the program, where 80, the first class of 80 graduated from the program, and the vast majority of them were actually moving into these jobs. That's an issue of program design, and I think that increasingly that's where, if you want to be effective politically, that's going to be the challenge, is thinking about, how are these, identifying the problem, thinking about what institutions can best carry out the mission, then, securing funding for the program and those institutions that can carry it out, and then having some sort of evaluation and monitoring and follow-up to make sure that they're actually getting the job done. That creates the kind of accountability that encourages voters to actually want to put more money into programs. I don't think it's just a function of getting more dollars. And as far as the argument that Congressman Rush has been making about seniority, I am firmly convinced, based on my observations in Springfield, that seniority is only as useful as the vision behind that seniority. I think that what a lot of legislators do with seniority is it helps them pad their campaign coffers. It secures their ability to get reelected. But if all you've got is seniority and you don't have much vision in terms of how to use that seniority, it doesn't do the voters all that much good.
I heard the state senator with the most seniority for the last few years. He didn't make many headlines.
He doesn't do much.
Well, he doesn't do anything. He's gone now.
Right. But no, the Howie gave up Art.
Yeah, that was my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they were right next to each other.
Right. I mean, right now in the state senate, you know, I've got, I won't name names, but there are legislators who've been down there 20 years, and if anything,
Who's the dean now?
probably Emil. I think Emil Jones. I think Emil probably has been down there longest. Now that our maybe Vince DeMusio of Dallas
In Collinsville.
But you know, what I've seen is a lot of times seniority makes you that much more cynical and removed from your constituents, and certainly that's true in Washington.
Right.
I mean, you know, I think there is a long list of senior congressmen who are completely undistinguished and have done nothing with that seniority. So I'm not overly impressed with that argument, particularly given the fact that, you know, I'm sufficiently young that in 10 years I'll have, you know, if what you were concerned with who over the next 20 years is going to have the most influence in Congress, then I don't think that Congressman Rush can make a persuasive argument that he would have more influence than I would 10 years out or 15 years out.
But people, did you read the Chicago Magazine article a couple months ago about Chicago's lack of clout in Washington? I mean, people have been saying that our most senior legislators was Bill Lipinski.
Yeah.
And, you know, Chicago really got stiffed on asking for transportation dollars. So.
Yeah, but I also think that, you know, part of it is that probably our most energetic and dynamic congressmen are the most junior congressmen. I mean, I think that Jesse Jackson Jr., Jan Schakowsky,
my congressman, he's very,
you know, and I think, you know, I think Jan.
He's definitely doing more than city agents.
Well, exactly. and I think.
Stewart.
Take a message, see if I can call him right back. I think that, you know, both Jan and Jesse Jr. are examples of, you get, you know, active, energetic, enthusiastic legislators. They can have a big impact early. You know, I've had a big impact in Springfield, relatively. You know, as I said before, what happens is that you can have an enormous influence on the process through the power of your ideas, even if you don't get your name as the chief sponsor of a bill, even if, you know, you are not necessarily getting credit for what happens. You can help frame the debate in ways that moves the agenda forward.
Well, people talk about you as new black leadership. But when I was at the Park Manor event, one of the guys there said, you know, it's I guess the generation that Bobby Rush represents, the civil rights generation, they've conquered the legal discrimination, and now we need somebody to focus on the economic issues, on economic empowerment. I mean, do you see anything like that? Do you see that it's time for a generational change?
Well, you know, I think that, I do think that if we want to attract talented people in public services out of the African American community, then we need to recognize that you know, people like myself, Jesse Jr., who have a lot of options, who are, you know, sufficiently credentialed as a consequence of the sacrifices that, you know, people before us made, that, you know, we can go into the private sector and make lots of money, or we can, you know, go into the non-for-profit sector and wield influence. That it makes sense for the community to take advantage of those talents and those gifts. And
Bellcaster Cummings says 4 minutes.
This is Chuck Minor's kind of extension. And I do think that you know, we need to attract more people like myself and Jesse Jr. into politics in the African American community. I think that, you know, what we've combined is roots in the community, deep concern about issues and deep interest in public policy, with the skills and training that we've been fortunate enough to obtain from you know, higher education.
And you need to get people like yourself to come back to the south side of Chicago.
Well, that's exactly right.
And were you always intending to come back when you went away to Arkansas?
Yeah, because as I said, I'm, if you think about it, I really have to want to be here. I'm like a salmon swimming upstream, ending up in the south side of Chicago. At every juncture in my life, I could have taken a turn. I'd taken a path of least resistance, but much higher pay.
Did you get any offers after you graduated from law school?
Well, yeah, being the president of Harvard Law is a big deal. The typical path for someone like myself is to, clerk for the Supreme Court.
Right.
And then basically you have your pick of any law firm in the country, and you're a partner in 4 years, or any investment bank in the country. If you go into government, typically what my peers did was go into government directly to Washington. So, I have classmates who, were general counsel for the FCC, and then parlayed that into, senior VP jobs for Ted Turner and folks like that.
Did you get any offers like that, or did you?
Yeah. But I really believe that part of the function of my generation of African Americans, I think, is to help to bridge the gap between a high-flying, high-tech, information-rich society and a working class, struggling constituency, and being able to bridge that gap and help move people to assure that they're sharing in this prosperity that we're creating in this new economy.
Right.
And also to make sure that ordinary folks have a seat at the decision-making table. That there isn't just this high-flying, cell phone wielding, internet hopping, ruling class that basically is making decisions about the economy without any accountability. But that actually people, are part of the process of self-governance.
Did you get the feeling that there are young people in your district who don't see much beyond the south side of Chicago?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I think that there are people there are huge numbers of kids in the south side of Chicago who've never been out of Chicago. Who have never been in an open field. And I think that it is more important than ever for our community to recognize these enormous changes that are taking place and make sure that those children are not left behind, that they don't become redundant workers in a new economy.
I mean, you could be a living example of, I think, life beyond the south side, or what education can do. I mean, one of the women at your fundraiser at Hummingbird, she said, I wish every kid on the south side went to Arkansas.
And I think that's true. That's why, actually, if Congressman Rush or Senator Trotter try to make my education or my affiliation with the University of Chicago a disability, I think they're making a strategic political mistake, because I actually think that if you talk to any 45, 50-year-old woman out in the south side of Chicago, and ask them, is it a good thing or a bad thing that somebody does well in school and gets a law degree? They're going to think it's a good thing. And I think that there is still, particularly among that generation of people who are voting, value in education that's deeply rooted. So I do think that there's going to be a generational transition, and I don't think it's unique to the African American community. I mean, I think you're starting to see it in politics, the Democratic Party in Illinois generally, with Dan Hines and Lisa Madigan and Rob Blagojevich.
That's a geographic and and a generational change. Actually, that's a touchy issue for a lot of Northsiders, those two.
Well, I understand, but I also think, but I also think though that what's interesting though is that they are also representative of the growth in those communities as well, in the sense that their parents are far more parochial,
right,
in their outlooks.
Right. Well, their parents are trying to get them out of the old neighborhood and into a permanently white constituency. That's the way we see it.
Well, I'm not sure that's part of it. But don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But my point though is I think that generally there's a generational transition that's taking place. Part of it is that Illinois and Chicago politics is is a crowded field. I think more so than a lot of other states. Progression is slow, and I think that people hang on to their political positions for long
Well,
time.
you've got a big city, which is likely a pretty flat line. Well, I guess we're getting to the end here, but I got
some specific questions.
Yeah. Well, this is about some of the things people talk about is well, there's nothing on the south side. This is not a self-contained community. What are some of the places though that you can't shop on the south side? I mean, have you managed to live most of your life down? Do you manage to live most of your life down there? And what are some of the places where people will find you? Some of the places you enjoy on the south side?
Well, I live a couple blocks away from the Museum of Science and Industry, and with an 18-month-old, that's a good place to take her, especially during the winter. The Ideas Factory is this wonderful little toddler playhouse, and so we spend quite a bit of time there. Before this congressional campaign, I was a big pickup basketball player, and so during the summers you'd find me out on the courts all through the South Side where there's some wonderful basketball games. My staff has banned me from basketball because right before a big fundraiser near the beginning of the campaign, I came in, walked in with a big black eye, and they decided that.
Which courts did you play?
Well, their courts. Actually, some of my favorite courts are right up Lakeshore Drive, just south of the museum.
Okay.
And you usually get some terrific games there. I actually think that there are wonderful restaurants and
what are some of your favorite restaurants?
Dixie Kitchen right in Hyde Park is terrific. They now have a Calypso right across the street, or right across the way, which is wonderful. I'm a big fan of some of the Southside institutions like Gladys's, Army and Lou's, Isola's. You've got wonderful cultural institutions like ETA that just has terrific African American plays. But I think that what is true is that the cultural richness of the South Side of Chicago is frequently transported to more lucrative venues.
You're talking about places like Kingston Mines,
right? Exactly.
Well, what's the other place on Buddy Guy's list?
Right. Right. Exactly. So it gets imported, and I think that one of the things that an economic development strategy for the South Side would do is to think strategically about how can we create a critical mass of cultural institutions, eating venues, recreational areas to attract the money that actually is in the community, but right now is being spent outside of the community. Now that, that's not a simple task. I mean, we're market-driven economy.
Yeah, quite honestly, you have to make sure people aren't intimidated by coming.
Well,
And I think that's part of the reason some of those institutions are up there.
Well, I think that's right.
Yeah.
And so all the issues that we talked about, public safety, schools,
Well, a community that has been successful in a way in that is Harlem.
yeah, well, increasingly so. And although try to find an apartment in Harlem, I mean, they've done in part because, people are just getting so priced out at this point that, but you're right though that it has been able to, there's no reason certainly that the near south side, the Bronxville area, shouldn't become that kind of a focal point. What's stopped it up until this point has been fear of public housing.
Right.
And I think that to the extent that we can create mixed income communities in those areas and sort of deconcentrate poverty along the stateway corridor, then I see no reason why we can't duplicate some of the successes that have occurred in Harlem right in that area. It's easy to access, and there's certainly a historical base for that kind of cultural activity in that area.
What are the books that have most influenced your political thinking, your political philosophy?
Well, I would say that some of my political philosophy, I would say that my political philosophy is probably more influenced by fiction than it is nonfiction.
Really?
Books like let me put it this way. I think it's both fiction and nonfiction.
Okay.
I mean, I think James Baldwin's essays, The Fire Next Time, the autobiography of Malcolm X, but also Song of Solomon, The Power Broker by Robert Moses. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
I've seen it.
Wonderful book. I mean, not because Moses is a particularly admirable character, but because I think it really focuses on the intricacies of power in an urban environment. Robert Carroll also wrote some autobiographies of Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah, I think I've been reading the first two.
Yeah, which are spectacular, and I think do the same thing.
And your own district is kind of rich African American literary.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Richard Bright. Yeah. So I can't say that there's one particular book that's been more important than others. I think that, but as I said, a lot of times what moves me politically are themes that I find in fiction. Themes of people overcoming great obstacles and great odds and creating communities, which I think is increasingly hard to do in today's society. And discovering one's roots and feeling a sense of place.
Well, that's got to be important for you.
Yeah.
I mean, finding a place where you put your roots down.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, my parents were both military brats.
Right.
The reason we stayed in our town for my whole childhood was they wanted us to have roots.
Yeah. And that's what I want my daughter to have. And I think that ultimately the reason that I'm involved in politics is I've got this basic faith in the democratic project. I really believe that, together, despite diversity of racial or religious or economic backgrounds, and find common ground and help create this common space that we all share.
Well, I'm glad you wrote a book about yourself, because that meant I didn't have to ask you all about your childhood. Right.
I think it's important to emphasize that half of my finance committee is made up of African American businessmen, most of them under the age of 50.
Okay.
They have been my leading fundraisers and my earliest fundraisers.
Yeah.
And I think that part of what they're looking for is a transition in political leadership that reflects their growing sophistication and their involvement in all levels of the economy. So I think that if you look at the disclosure statements, what you'll see is that we've raised more money from African Americans than either the other two candidates.
Yeah.
We have more small contributions than either of the two candidates. We have more contributions from in the district than either of the two candidates.
Right.
I think that Senator Trotter just hasn't raised much money. Period.
No, he hasn't.
And Congressman Rush, in his last disclosure, 60% of his funding came from Washington tax. His biggest fundraiser is Ameritech.
Is John Schmidt your finance chairman?
No.
What's his role in your campaign?
He's just on the finance committee.
Okay.
I think that
We'll have a guy from outside the district on the finance.
if you want to raise money in this town, then there's a relatively small circle of Democratic givers.
Okay.
And basically my finance committee is made up of about half folks who are African American business people, many of whom live in the district.
Okay.
And then the other half are just big time Democratic donors who have given to Congressman Rush in the past.
So you need some of both if you're going to make it.
Yeah. John Schmidt was a contributor. Bobby Rush had no money taking contributions from John Schmidt in previous elections.
Okay.
I think it's important to, when you look at these disclosures, to Bobby Rush's biggest contributor is various Ameritech executives. In addition to the Ameritech PAC, if you looked at his last disclosure statement, it was $1,000 from people living in Winnetka.
Well, do you have anything to say about him going to a fundraiser being hosted by a major anti-gun control?
I sure do. I think the notion that that his major financial patron in Washington has so far been John Dingell.
Yeah.
When he's out here trumpeting his credentials as this anti-gun violence person, and you and I both know that John Dingell is the NRA's strongest ally, not just in the Democratic Party, but across the board. I think smacks of hypocrisy.
Okay.
Well, that's some of the. Okay, I'm ready.
They're going to rewind it 1 second. Miss Senator can play the first ad and the second.
Okay.
Let's do it. Here we go.
Obama for Congress. Spot total of 4, 60-second radio, and phone number is DO-.
State Senator Barack Obama, candidate for Congress, speaking with a group of frustrated Southside seniors.
Senator Obama, the cost of prescription drugs has gotten so high, sometimes I can't afford the medicine I need.
You know, I've always backed Bobby Rush, but I don't see him doing anything about these high prices.
Let me tell you something. The profits of drug companies are at record levels. Meanwhile, we've got seniors who are having to choose between their food, their rent, and their prescription drugs. That's not right. I'm running for Congress to fight for First District families and our seniors on prescription drugs and HMO reform. Barack Obama, civil rights lawyer, the head of Project Vote. As our state senator, Barack Obama has taken on the drug and insurance companies with his fight for affordable health care. America's health care system locks out too many people. I'm fighting to change that.
Barack, we need a congressman like you who would do more than just talk.
Barack Obama, Democrat for Congress. Leadership that works for us.
A4 by Obama for Congress 2000.
open the trunk.
It could happen to you or to someone you love. Stopped by police for no apparent reason except that you fit a racial profile secretly used by police. It's called racial profiling, and it's an unethical and dangerous practice that needs to end. Now, State Senator Barack Obama, candidate for Congress in the 1st District, is leading the fight to end racial profiling.
This is State Senator Barack Obama. Racial profiling is not only wrong and degrading, it's dangerous and can lead to unexpected confrontations. Not only that, it erodes confidence in law enforcement. That's why I've introduced legislation